Okay, great. Thank you so much. It's really wonderful to be back. We've got a new year, and I'm all set for a really productive time, and doing these webinars is part of that. It's really wonderful to be able to reach out. And while I can't hear you, I get to hear your feedback during the question and answers and on the blogs, and it's just really wonderful to have an interchange like this. So today we're going to be talking about brick wall tips for beginners. And I just want to start by saying a big thank you. For those of you who follow my blog, you would know that I put out a blog post on Sunday asking for input from you about your brick walls so that I could help fine-tune these webinars. I've found in the past that sometimes I'm surprised by the certain demographic of the audience, and you guys responded in full force. Boy, I got loads of comments on the blog, lots of private emails. You guys really gave me a very good sense of what issues you're having with brick walls, and that's just what I needed. I'm not going to try and solve your brick walls today specifically. However, I'm hoping that what I will be doing is giving you the strategies that you need to perhaps bring those brick walls down with some things that you haven't thought of before or you've just forgotten about. So this is a 10 tips for beginners webinar. So it is geared towards beginners for this webinar. I'm doing 2 webinars. The next one is October, and that intermediate level. When I got all the input about your brick walls, I divided that information up based on whether I thought it would fit better into the beginning webinar or the intermediate webinar. Now, many of you who wrote in had brick walls that you've been working on for like 20 or 30 years. I mean, serious brick walls. So if you don't hear information today that you think is really going to help that, it might be that I'm saving strategies to address your brick wall for the intermediate level, okay? So I just wanted to clarify that I wanted to separate it and ease our way into these brick wall tips. Also, another point I want to make before starting is that the tips today are not geographically based. You should be able to apply these tips no matter where you are in the world. The examples are typically going to be from my realm of research, which is predominantly New England, New York, Pennsylvania. But I've designed the webinar in such a way that really geography shouldn't matter, and it should be all about the tip and the strategy behind using it to help bring your brick wall down. So keep that in mind. Don't get distracted by, a map of Boston or something like that. All right, we're going to cover 10 tips. We're going to start out, maybe you might feel a little basic, and then get a little progressively harder as we go along. So tip 1 is review your documentation. And I know some of you are already rolling your eyes. You're saying, oh, that's not a brick wall tip. Well, I would disagree with you. This is probably one of the absolutely most important things that you can do when you're doing your research. When I was working on the Nathan Brown case for Jeff, I was reviewing constantly. Anytime I got a new piece of information, a new document, I would read the document and then I would review all of the information that I had. But it's not simply reading what you have. That's where I want you to start. I want you to take all of your information, whether it's in notebooks or in a computer program, in a pedigree chart, family group sheets. I want you to take all the information you have and go through it. But then the next step, and this is probably what you're not doing, I want you to reorganize all this information into new ways for you to be able to visualize your research, find gaps, and see what you're missing. So let's go through some of the examples of ways that you can reorganize your information through a review process. Now, creating a timeline. Have you done that for your brick wall? Come on, answer yourself honestly right now. Have you created something like this? It's a very simple chart that I created in Microsoft Word. It's got the date column, chronological from birth to death, on the left, location in the next column, the event, and then sources for the last column. This is a really nice visual way to see the whole life of your ancestor and to get an idea of where your ancestor lived, what events happened, things like that. However, what you want to do with a timeline like this is you want to look for gaps. You want to look for things that aren't quite right. So for instance, if we look at 1788, we see the birth of a child, Elizabeth. 1789, another child. 1792, another child. 1794, 1796, 1799. So the children start off coming kind of quickly, and then they settle down into pretty much a two-year pattern, which is normal during this time period. And from 1796 to 1799, it's a 3-year spread instead of 2, but that's really not off too much. However, look at that from 1799 to 1808. That's a 9-year gap between those last 2 children. Now, that's a red flag, and that's exactly the kind of thing that you want to find when you create a timeline. What happened during that time period? Were there babies born that didn't survive? Were there miscarriages? Was the father away? Was he traveling? Was he away for work? Was he in the military? So a timeline is going to help you find inconsistencies like this. It doesn't always have to be about the birth of children. It could be something else. But that's what you want to be on the lookout for. Another thing to do, and it's a fun thing to do, but it's very helpful, is to create a map. Now, I did this in MapQuest, and you can do it straight from your timeline. You take the year and you look at where they were, and just go progressively through their life. And so my ancestor, William Edwards, he started in Germantown. He's from Wales. I didn't include that on this map. But he started out in Germantown, New York, for the records that I have. He then went up to Stillwater, New York. And then he went west to Charleston, New York. So it's important to get a sense of where your ancestor lived. And you can see it very visually this way. I circled Albany because that is the capital of New York, and that's sort of the economic center. And so that would probably be important in relation to the places where my ancestor lived. But he didn't actually live there himself. Another little quick list that you can create, and again, these are just visual helps, but they help you process your information in your mind. They help you think of things in a different way. It's just a location list. It's a very simple location list. On the right-hand side, the left-hand side, you're going to have the dates. On the right-hand side, the locations. So I can see in his early life, he lived in Wales. I don't know exactly when he arrived in America, so there's a question mark. I put 1776 to 1783 as New York. Apparently he was in the Revolutionary War. I don't know exactly when he served, so I'm just saying that it's generally in that time frame. And then I am putting down his residences based on the birth of children, census records, things like that. This is very important so that you can focus in on researching those specific places at those specific times. At the same time, you want to keep in mind that all those places are fair game throughout your ancestor's life. So don't exclude them just because they weren't in a certain place at a certain time. Another thing that you can create is a record quick list. Now, this is just something I created on my own. This is not an official genealogy thing, and it is not a research plan or a research calendar. The idea of what I was trying to do with this is to think of as many record types that might impact my ancestor, and then visually create a chart so that I could see very easily, have I checked for those records? Did I find anything or didn't I find anything? And you might think that that is redundant and repetitive, found yes, found no, but it gets very confusing when you check for something and then if you don't find something but you don't necessarily write it down, it's those negative searches that are really important to capture. And so by creating a chart like this, you can say, well, look at this. I have not checked for a birth record in Wales. That's something I still need to do. Now, I'm not ready to do that because I don't have enough information about his lifespan or anything like that to know when in Wales I really should be checking the parish registers, but I've included it on my list anyways. I still need to check military service. Under marriage record, you can see there I put family Bible for the Schmidt family. That would be his wife's family. Now, is there family Bible? I have no idea, but I'm just putting it down there to trigger my mind that it may exist, and at some point I'm going to want to maybe create a Google alert and see if I can attract a Schmidt Bible that way. So there are very specific things that you can do. If you look under probate records, I actually put down a family history library film that I need to check, and then there are other things that are more general and more vague, but they need to be taken care of. So that's what this quick list is for. Put all the records on that you can possibly think of and then keep track of what you've checked and what you haven't checked. The kind of items that you can put on a quick list are going to vary depending on the time frame of your ancestor. If you're talking about a 20th century ancestor, a 19th century, etc., you're going to want to include all of the basic records, and land, probate, taxes, court records, newspaper research, don't forget that, cemetery research. Think of everything that could possibly impact your ancestor and include that on your list. Your list could be a couple pages long. There are books that you can get out of the library or purchase that can help you with making up these lists. You know, they contain full lists of all different record types. So try and come up with a record quick list so you can keep track of what you've looked for and what you haven't looked for. Another very visual thing you can do is just create a surname map. Now, my brick wall is William Edwards, so I've got him there in bold and in the gold circle. His wife is Christina Schmidt, and then it was anglicized to Christine Smith. So I've got her surname there because I need to keep in mind that there could be records that could help me solve my brick wall on her side of the family. In all the brown circles, those are the spouses' surnames of the children's. Again, those could be potential sources for information. This is just a nice visual, easy way to remind yourself of what names you need to keep in mind. Bartel up there at the top, that is the wife's mother's maiden name. So that would be another important one to keep in mind. It doesn't matter exactly what sort of charts you come up with. Whatever you think will help you visualize your information and see it in a new way, that's going to be helpful. Now, in addition to all your pedigree charts and your family group sheets and the information in your software, besides all this compiled information, you want to go back and review original documents. And you probably want to do that a couple times. And again, I know you're saying, oh, this is really basic, it's really obvious, but you need to do this. I find that the more experienced researchers do this more often, and beginning researchers do this less. When you look at a document like this, and this is actually from the Nathan Brown webinar, it's a nice document, so I thought I'd toss this one in there. You want to look for all the literal information. Read the document. What is the document telling you specifically? In this particular one, we're getting some relationships spelled out for us. But there's other information that can be inferred from original documents. What is that information that's being inferred? Can you try to find that subtle information? For instance, this document was signed in 1778. Well, we can infer that all these people were still living as of that date in 1778. Another thing, do you see on the left side there, we've got two witnesses, Peleg Sherman and, Edward Luther. Those are two further people to research. Did you notice them the first time that you got this document? So I want to stress that although it seems like a very basic task for tackling a brick wall, it's a very important one to review all of your documentation regularly. Again, tip number 2, verbally discuss your research. And I won't spend a lot of time on this, but this is important. I'm not talking about having